Mr. Whitmore, I'm afraid your son has already signed the authorization forms. Those words hit me harder than the heart attack that nearly killed me. While I was lying in the cardiac wing of MUSC Health in Charleston, tubes running through my veins, my chest cut open from triple bypass surgery. My only son, Evan, was in a mahogany-paneled office faking my signature on papers worth millions. By the time I woke up, my $3.8 million boutique hotel on King Street, the one I spent 20 years restoring from a crumbling brick warehouse, was no longer mine. Neither was my $1.1 million yacht moored on the Ashley River, the boat my late wife and I used to watch fireworks every 4th of July. My son had traded them for quick cash, as if they were poker chips, as if my life's work was his to pawn. And the cruelest part, he did it while telling the doctors and nurses, "Don't worry, I'll handle everything for my dad." I know what you're thinking. How could a son betray his own father like that? That's what I asked myself when I saw the empty slip at the marina, when I read the foreclosure notice tucked into a stack of unopened mail. But betrayal doesn't arrive all at once. It drips slowly, disguised as concern, until the day it swallows everything. Before I take you further, let me introduce myself properly. My name is Lawrence Whitmore. I'm 73 years old. For 3 decades, I built bridges and highways across South Carolina. When my hands were too stiff for construction, I turned to real estate. I started with one rental house and grew it into Whitmore Realty, a company that quietly shaped half the skyline of Charleston. I never bragged, never flaunted, because I believed success speaks loudest when it whispers. I thought I'd raised my son Evan to understand that. Clearly, I was wrong. The night my chest collapsed like a steel girder snapping in a storm, I thought the fight was with my heart. But lying there drifting in and out of morphine dreams, I didn't realize the real fight was with my own blood. While I struggled to breathe, Evan was already living like a king. I later learned he was hosting parties at rooftop lounges, flashing a new Patek Philippe watch worth $70,000 and driving around in a leased Maserati, all financed by loans against my properties secured with my forged signature. He thought he was clever. He thought no one would notice. He thought his old man wouldn't wake up, but I did. And when I opened my eyes and saw him sitting at my bedside, squeezing my hand with crocodile tears, whispering, "Dad, thank God you're alive," I didn't yet know that the hand he held was the same one he had copied onto a stack of fraudulent documents. I want to pause for a second and speak directly to you, the one watching this. If you're here right now, listening to the start of my story, I'd ask one thing: subscribe and tell me where you're watching from. Because trust me, if betrayal like this can happen to me, a man who built fortunes and thought he raised his family right, it can happen to anyone. And you'll want to see how I turned his game upside down. Looking back, the signs were there. Evan was always ambitious, always reaching for more than he could hold. A $3,000 a month penthouse on a $120,000 salary. Designer suits he couldn't afford. Instagram photos of champagne dinners at the Peninsula Grill. I wanted to believe he was hustling, making deals, carving out his own success. But the truth was uglier. He was drowning in debt and saw me as his lifeline. And when life handed him the perfect opportunity, his father unconscious in a hospital bed, he didn't hesitate. The betrayal wasn't just financial. It was spiritual. It cut into the very marrow of who I was. My late wife, Margaret, used to tell me, "Lawrence, the Lord tests us not by what others do to us, but by how we answer." I didn't know it then, But this would be the greatest test of my 73 years. Because when you wake up from surgery expecting family love and find out you've been robbed blind, you have two choices: lie down and die or stand up and fight. I chose to fight. January 11th, 2024. I remember the beeping monitors more than I remember the pain. My chest had been opened, veins from my legs sewn into my heart, and the only reason I was still breathing was because a team of surgeons refused to let me go. The first thing I saw when I woke was the ceiling tiles of the cardiac ICU at MUSC Health. The second was my son Evan sitting beside me, a paper cup of hospital coffee in his hands. His eyes were red, his face lined with worry. He reached out and gripped my wrist. "Dad," he whispered, "the doctors weren't sure you'd make it. You scared me half to death." I believed him then. I wanted to believe him. Dr. Collins, my cardiologist, leaned over the rail of the bed. "Mr. Whitmore, you've had a massive heart attack. Triple bypass. The good news is the surgery was successful. The bad news, you're on thin ice. No stress. No business. No arguments. Your heart needs rest." Evan nodded like an altar boy in church. "Don't worry, doctor. I'll take care of everything while Dad recovers." At the time, I felt relief. Here was my only child stepping up like a man should. Paying bills, handling phone calls, making sure the family business didn't collapse while I learned to breathe without pain. But if you've ever been in a hospital bed, drugged on morphine, drifting in and out of fog, you know how easy it is to lose track of time. Hours bleed into days. A nurse comes in, another leaves, and you don't know if it's morning or midnight. For 13 days, I floated between worlds. And through it all, Evan was there always with reassuring words. "Dad, the utilities are handled. Dad, property taxes are paid. Dad, you just rest. Don't worry about a thing." It was comforting, but it was also dangerous. Because while I trusted him with my life, he was quietly rewriting my future. On the 5th day, Dr. Collins ordered a mental competency test, standard procedure for men my age after surgery. They asked me questions, gave me puzzles, checked my recall. Despite the fog of painkillers, I scored nearly perfect. My mind was sharp, my memory clear. That detail recorded in my medical file would later become the cornerstone of my defense. It proved that when my son claimed I was too confused to manage my affairs, he was lying. But at the time, I had no idea those test results would one day save me. Nights in the hospital are long. Machines hiss and beep. Footsteps echo down the halls. And when sleep wouldn't come, I'd close my eyes and remember Margaret, my late wife. She used to hold my hand during thunderstorms and say, "Lawrence, God never promised us calm seas, only that He'd be with us in the storm." Lying there with stitches in my chest, I whispered a prayer. "Lord, if you've kept me here, let me live with honor. Don't let me become a burden. Show me how to face whatever comes next." It gave me peace, at least for a while. I thought the storm had already passed. I didn't know the real storm was walking into my hospital room every morning, dressed in tailored suits, smiling like the perfect sun. On January 24th, I was strong enough to take a few steps with a walker. Evan clapped me on the back. "That's my dad, toughest man I know." He said it with pride, and I almost believed he meant it. But when I asked about my truck, the old Ford I drove to job sites, he hesitated. "In the shop, Dad. Don't worry about it." When I asked why he'd been carrying around a thick folder of documents, he smiled. "Just tax forms. You don't need to stress." Every answer was smooth, polished, ready. I didn't realize he was rehearsing lies he'd soon repeat to lawyers, bankers, and anyone who questioned how a 32-year-old junior banker suddenly had access to millions. I left the hospital 2 weeks later, weak but grateful. Evan wheeled me out to his shiny Maserati, the leather smelling brand new. He said it was a company car, a perk of his promotion. I wanted to believe him. I truly did. Because a father's heart doesn't stop loving even when it's been broken open. But deep down, a whisper stirred something isn't right. And I would soon find out just how right that whisper was. The first breath of fresh air outside the hospital should have been a blessing. After 2 weeks of recycled oxygen and antiseptic hauls, Charleston's salt-kissed breeze felt like life itself. Evan helped me into his Maserati, the engine purring like a predator. "Dad, relax," he said, sliding on his designer sunglasses. "You're free. Just focus on healing." But my instincts, the same instincts that kept me alive on construction sites and in boardrooms, were whispering. Something was wrong. We drove past the marina, and that's when I noticed the empty slip. My yacht, Margaret's Grace, named after my late wife, was gone. I straightened in my seat, despite the stitches tugging at my chest. "Evan," I said slowly, "where's the boat?" He cleared his throat, kept his eyes on the road. "Dad, you weren't using it. Insurance, docking fees, maintenance, it was bleeding money. I made an executive decision. You sold it." My voice cracked like timber under pressure. "Liquidated," he corrected, as if wordplay softened betrayal. "It was the smart move. We needed cash for your medical bills. Trust me, Dad, it was the responsible thing to do." I clenched the armrest, every beat of my healing heart thudding like a hammer against steel. "Without asking me, you were in no condition to decide anything." He said it gently, like a doctor breaking bad news. When we reached King Street, I saw something that made the blood drain from my face. My boutique hotel, the pride of my later years, the property I'd saved from demolition and turned into a Charleston jewel, was draped with a banner that screamed, "Under new management." There was a fresh logo above the entrance. Strangers moving in and out, staff uniforms I didn't recognize. My hands shook as I pressed against the car window. What in God's name happened here? Evan's jaw tightened. He pulled into the valet line like it was no big deal. "Dad, listen. The hotel market is volatile. Occupancy was dropping. I made a strategic call to refinance." "Refinance," my voice rose. "That sign doesn't say refinance. That sign says I don't own it anymore." He parked, turned to me with a rehearsed calm. "Dad, I transferred it into a holding company for your protection. The medical bills, the uncertainty, it was too much risk. This way you're liquid. Safe." I stared at him. My son, my blood. And all I saw was a stranger. Inside the lobby, a manila folder waited on the counter, as if destiny had left it there just for me. Evan grabbed it before I could, but not fast enough. I caught a glimpse of the top sheet. Power of attorney Lawrence A. Whitmore. My signature sprawled across the bottom, but it wasn't mine. I'd signed thousands of contracts in my life. I knew the rhythm of my pen, the slant of my W, the break and the T of Whitmore. This was close, too close, but not mine. I looked up, my voice low and dangerous. "When did I sign these, Evan?" "January 15th, he said quickly. "Right before your second procedure. You were lucid." "You don't remember lucid," I whispered. "I was unconscious for 18 hours that day." His face flickered. Just for a second, but enough. Every detail suddenly fit together, the Maserati company car. The expensive watch flashing on his wrist. The folder he carried around like a shield. My missing yacht, my stolen hotel. This wasn't care. This wasn't protection. This was theft, dressed up in Armani and lies. Evan, I said, gripping the counter to steady myself. You forged my signature. He shook his head violently. No, Dad, no. You don't understand. I did this for you. For us. The bills were mounting and don't lie to me. My voice cut through the polished air of the lobby. You gambled with everything I built. He reached for my arm. Dad, your heart, please. Don't get worked up. The doctor said I yanked away. The doctor said no stress. You think that means I won't fight, son? You just made the worst mistake of your life. For the first time since my surgery, I felt strong. Not physically, my body was still weak, but in spirit. Because now I knew the truth. And once a man like me knows the truth, he doesn't let it go. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at the oak desk in my study, the same desk where I'd signed every major contract of my life. But this time, the papers in front of me weren't blueprints for bridges or deeds for properties. They were copies of documents with my forged signature. My own son's betrayal staring back at me in black ink. I picked up the phone and dialed a number I knew by heart. Michael, I said when he answered. I need you at my house. Now. Michael Sanders had been my attorney for over 30 years. We'd fought zoning battles together, drafted complex real estate trusts, and once even sued a bank that tried to cheat me on a commercial loan. He was more than a lawyer. He was a friend who knew the difference between my real signature and an imposter's scrawl. 30 minutes later, he walked into my kitchen with his briefcase. His silver hair was damp from the Charleston rain, but his eyes were sharp. Show me, he said. I spread the documents across the table. The supposed power of attorney, the transfer deeds, the loan agreements tied to my hotel and yacht. Michael adjusted his glasses, scanning each page. Then he shook his head slowly. Lawrence, this is bad. Tell me something I don't know, I muttered. No, listen. He tapped one of the pages. These aren't just forgeries. They were processed through Whitmore Realty. I blinked. Through my company. He nodded grimly. The signatures, the filings, the notary stamps, they all went through your firm's channels. Evan walked into Whitmore Realty, claimed he had power of attorney, and pushed the deals through your own staff. They didn't know any better. To them, it looked legitimate. For a moment, I just stared at him. Then, despite the rage burning inside me, I actually laughed. A bitter, humorless laugh. My son, I said slowly, stole from me, using my own company. He literally paid me commission to rob me. Michael leaned forward. Exactly. That's why we have leverage. You're still the majority shareholder. You still control the books. We can trace every step of this fraud back to him. Michael opened his briefcase and began pulling out files. I'll need copies of your medical records, anything that proves you were incapacitated when these were supposedly signed. Also, the results of that mental competency test the hospital gave you. Already requested, I said. Dr. Collins told me I scored nearly perfect. Good. That destroys his claim that you weren't fit to handle your affairs. He kept flipping pages, his brow furrowed. Look here, Evan didn't just liquidate. He used your assets as collateral to pull loans from private lenders. High interest, short term, dangerous. If he defaults, they'll come after you, not him. I slammed my hand on the table, over my dead body. Michael met my eyes. That's exactly what he was counting on Lawrence. For hours, we mapped it out, the yacht, the hotel, the fake holding company, the private loans. Piece by piece, the puzzle became clear Evan hadn't been helping. He'd been building a personal empire on the back of mine. And the irony, he chose Whitmore Realty because he thought it was just a convenient agency with good connections. He had no idea his old man still owned 72% of the shares, quietly pulling the strings all along. Michael closed the last folder. So what do you want to do? Go to the police now? I leaned back, staring at the ceiling. No, not yet. If we move too early, he'll spin the story play, the dutiful son trying to protect his sick father. People will believe him, then what's the plan? I looked at the forged signature one more time and felt my resolve harden. We let him dig his own grave. And then we close it in public. Before Michael left, I walked him to the door. Rain was still falling soft, but steady tapping against the windows. My chest ached, but not from surgery. From betrayal, Michael. I said quietly, this isn't just about money. If I let Evan get away with this, he'll think elder abuse is acceptable. Others will think I'm finished. I need to show him and everyone else that I'm not a weak old man to be taken advantage of. Michael put a hand on my shoulder. Then you'd better be ready for a war. I nodded. I've been building for battles my whole life. This one will just be personal. And to you listening now, if you followed my story this far, I want to know you're still with me. Drop a number 1 in the comments right now, so I know you're walking beside me through this. Because the next step wasn't survival. It was justice. Michael left my house just past midnight, briefcase heavy with forged papers, and my fury scribbled into every note we'd made. But sleep didn't come. I sat in the dark, staring at the glow of the harbor lights, listening to the rain. Margaret used to say storms have a way of cleansing the air. But this storm wasn't washing anything away. It was building. By morning, I knew what I had to do. I picked up the phone again, this time dialing a number I'd used only twice in my life. Angela Ruiz, Private Investigations, came a steady female voice. Angela, I said, this is Lawrence Whitmore. I need you to follow my son. Angela was a former financial crimes detective who'd gone private after getting tired of red tape. If there was money missing, she could sniff it out faster than any bloodhound. By the end of her first week shadowing Evan, she had a folder thick enough to choke a banker. Mr. Whitmore, she said, sliding the folder across my desk. Your son isn't saving for your medical bills. He's burning through money like kerosene on a bonfire. I opened the folder and felt my stomach twist. A Patek Philippe watch, $70,000. Lease payments on the Maserati, $2,800 per month. Penthouse suite at the Ritz-Carlton, $14,000 for a 2-week stay. Dinner at Peninsula Grill, $4,600 one night. A diamond ring, 3 carats, $58,000. Angela flipped another page. He's telling people you gave him an early inheritance, that you wanted him to start strong before you passed on. I closed my eyes. The gall of it. Not only had he stolen from me, he was painting himself as a dutiful son blessed with my generosity. How much is left? I asked. Angela hesitated. Not much. He's bled nearly $500,000 in 6 weeks. I pushed the file aside, breathing slow, deliberate. Rage wouldn't serve me. Precision would. Angela, I said, keep tracking everything. Bank transfers, credit cards, every receipt, no matter how small. I want the whole picture. She nodded. What's your end game? I looked out the window toward the Charleston skyline glittering with the money I'd built and the pride I'd kept quiet for decades. I'm not going to destroy him in private, I said. That would teach him nothing. I'm going to let him destroy himself in front of the people he most wants to impress. That opportunity came sooner than expected. A week later, an envelope arrived in my mail embossed in gold. You are invited, Evan Whitmore's 37th birthday celebration. The Ritz-Carlton, Charleston 250 guests. Black tie. Inside was a handwritten note. Dad, it would mean the world to me if you gave a short toast about how proud you are of my financial accomplishments. Everyone will be there. Please don't say no. I sat there staring at the note, the edges trembling in my hands. It was almost laughable. He wanted me, the man he'd robbed, to stand up in front of Charleston's wealthy elite and praise him for his success. That was the moment I knew God himself had opened the door for justice. The next 2 weeks, Michael and Angela worked like generals preparing for war. Michael compiled every forged document cross-referenced with my hospital records. Angela secured security camera footage from Whitmore Realty, clear shots of Evan signing papers, handing over IDs and pretending to be me. I meanwhile recorded every conversation Evan had with me after I'd left the hospital. Each time he bragged about strategic decisions, I pressed the button on my phone. Each lie was preserved, each arrogance caught on tape. By the time we were finished, I had a manila envelope so thick it could topple a tower. Inside was everything, proof of fraud, evidence of spending, recordings of lies. But I wasn't just carrying paper. I was carrying 30 years of lessons, bridges I'd built that still stood, deals I'd closed that shaped a city, honor I'd lived by that no one could forge. Evan thought I was weak. He thought I was just a sick old man who'd finally slipped. But he was about to learn what happens when you mistake silence for surrender. The Ritz-Carlton ballroom would be his stage, and I would let him hang himself with his own rope. The night before Evan's grand celebration, Charleston was quiet in a way only river cities can be. The streets glowed under lantern-style lamps. The harbor lights shimmered across black water, and the rain had finally stopped. But inside my house there was no peace. I sat at my kitchen table, the manila envelope of evidence resting beside a cup of untouched coffee. For days I'd been collecting proof, signatures, recordings, photographs of Evan's extravagance. Tomorrow all of it would see daylight. Tomorrow my son would face the truth. But tonight it was just me and the silence. I opened the top drawer of the desk and pulled out something I hadn't touched in months, Margaret's old journal. My late wife had filled it with little notes and prayers during her last years. She'd been gone nearly a decade, yet her handwriting still carried her voice. On the last page she'd written, Lawrence, never let the boy inherit without earning it. Love him, yes, but don't let love blind you. Remember, God gave us stewardship not to hoard, but to protect what is just. I traced the words with my finger. My throat tightened. She had seen something in Evan that I had refused to admit. His hunger was not for work, but for shortcuts. And in my silence, I had let it grow. I leaned back, staring at the ceiling, and for the first time in months, I prayed out loud. Lord, you've carried me through bridges, collapsing hurricanes, tearing through the coast, and a heart that almost gave out. Tomorrow I ask not for revenge. I ask for clarity. Let me stand for justice, not pride. Let me speak truth without hate. Give me strength not to destroy my son, but to stop the lie he's living. The words came haltingly at first, then steadier. I hadn't prayed like that since Margaret's funeral. But in that quiet kitchen with the Atlantic breeze drifting through an open window, I felt something I hadn't felt since the surgery peace. Not the peace of forgetting, the peace of purpose. I poured myself a glass of water and stared out at the city skyline. Evan was likely already at the Ritz-Carlton hosting his rehearsal dinner, laughing with his friends, flashing that ridiculous watch on his wrist. He thought tomorrow would be his coronation, but tomorrow wouldn't be his crowning. It would be his reckoning. Michael had called earlier. "Lawrence, are you sure you want to do this in public? A private lawsuit would be cleaner." Cleaner, I told him, but not sharper. Evan needs to be cut by the truth in front of every person he's lied to. Only then will he understand what honor costs. Angela had agreed. Exposure is the only language a man like him understands. You show him in front of 250 people, and he'll never forget it. I didn't tell either of them the real reason I was doing it this way. Deep down, I wanted Evan to feel the weight of his mother's words. She had warned him at her bedside once, "Son, your father built with calloused hands. Don't you dare waste it with soft lies." He laughed, then brushed it off. But tomorrow he'd hear her voice again through me. At midnight, I placed the journal back in the drawer and shut it gently, like closing her hand inside mine one last time. Then I slipped the envelope into my suit jacket, hung it by the door, and checked the watch on my wrist. Not a Patek Philippe, not a Rolex, just a sturdy old Seiko Margaret had bought me for our 25th anniversary. It still ticked perfectly. It reminded me value isn't about price tags. It's about endurance. I turned off the lights and whispered into the dark, "Tomorrow, son, you'll see who your father really is." And with that, I finally slept. The Ritz-Carlton ballroom glowed like a palace. Crystal chandeliers scattered light across white linen tables, waiters in black vests floated by with silver trays, and a string quartet played softly in the corner. 250 guests filled the room, bankers, lawyers, socialites, Evan's colleagues from the financial district, even his girlfriend's wealthy family. At the center of it all stood Evan, my son, my betrayer. Dressed in a custom Italian tuxedo, glass of champagne in hand, he looked every bit the rising star he pretended to be. "Dad," he called when he spotted me at the doorway. His voice carried across the room, too loud, too polished. "Ladies and gentlemen, my father Lawrence Whitmore is here tonight." Applause erupted. I forced a smile, my hand tightening around the envelope tucked under my arm. Evan hurried over, kissing my cheek, as if we were best friends. "You look fantastic," he whispered low enough only I could hear. "Remember what we talked about, Dad? Just a few words about how proud you are. Don't make a scene." I met his eyes, and for the first time he flinched. Dinner passed in a blur of clinking glasses and shallow laughter. I barely touched my filet mignon. Across the table, Evan regaled his guests with stories about bold financial strategies and emerging markets. He spoke like he'd invented wealth itself. His girlfriend, a young woman named Claire, leaned against him adoringly. Her parents, old Charleston money, nodded with approval. They thought their daughter was marrying a financial prodigy. Finally, as dessert plates were cleared, Evan stood and tapped his glass. The room quieted. Friends, colleagues, family. He began his voice, confident, theatrical. "Thank you for celebrating my 32nd birthday with me. This year has been extraordinary. I've transitioned from middle management to high net worth asset management. I've taken bold steps in real estate, liquidating properties for better cash flow. And I couldn't have done it without the man who taught me everything, my father. He gestured to me. 250 heads turned. Dad, he said, his grin wide and triumphant. Would you join me for a toast? Tell everyone how proud you are of the way I've handled our family's future. The crowd applauded, cheering for a father-son moment. I rose slowly, feeling every eye in the room. My heart beat steady, not with fear, but with purpose. I walked to the stage, my footsteps echoing against marble floors. Evan handed me the microphone with a flourish, expecting praise. I took a deep breath. Thank you, I said. My voice calm, measured. When a man lives 73 years, he learns many lessons. Some come from building bridges, some from raising a family, and some from betrayal. A ripple went through the crowd. Evan shifted uncomfortably, his smile tightening. Before I continue, I said, reaching into my jacket, I'd like to share something Evan told me just last week. I pulled out my phone, tapped play. The ballroom filled with Evan's voice, loud and clear. Dad, you don't understand modern finance. Your old school real estate approach is dead. The room went silent. People looked from the speakers to Evan, who froze like a deer in headlights. I paused the recording. That was my son explaining why he sold my properties without permission while I was recovering from heart surgery. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Claire's hand slipped from Evan's arm. Evan stepped forward, his voice strained. Dad, what are you doing? I turned to the guests. You've all heard about Evan's success, but what you haven't heard is how he achieved it. Tonight I'll tell you. The room was holding its breath. Forks were suspended mid-air. The string quartet had stopped playing. While I lay unconscious after surgery, I continued, my voice steady. My son forged my signature, liquidated my yacht worth $1.1 million, and signed away my boutique hotel valued at $3.8 million. He didn't invest the money. He spent it on watches, cars, penthouses, and parties like this one. I let the words hang heavy. Heads turned toward Evan, eyes narrowing. His girlfriend's father looked like stone, his jaw tight. Evan tried to laugh, but it came out hollow. Dad, that's come on. This is just a misunderstanding. Is it? I asked softly. Then I held up the manila envelope. Because right here I have proof. And if anyone doubts it, you'll see soon enough. The ballroom was silent, charged, waiting. Evan shifted from foot to foot, sweat glistening on his forehead. And for the first time in his life, my son realized he no longer controlled the story. The silence after the recording was suffocating. You could hear nothing but the faint hum of the air conditioning and the clink of a single champagne glass set down too hard. Evan's face had gone pale, his smile stiff as plaster. Dad, he said, forcing a laugh that didn't reach his eyes. You're confused. The medication, the surgery, people misremember things. Let's not. I raised my hand, cutting him off. Confused, I scored a perfect 30 out of 30 on my mental competency test while I was in that hospital bed. Dr. Collins is here tonight. Would you like him to confirm that? From the crowd, a voice spoke firmly. He's telling the truth. Dr. Collins himself, in a navy suit, stood with arms crossed. Gasps swept the room. I reached into the envelope and pulled out the first sheet, holding it high. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the so-called power of attorney Evan used to strip me of my assets. But take a closer look. This isn't my signature. It's a forgery submitted while I was unconscious in cardiac ICU. I handed copies to two nearby guests. They examined them, nodded, and passed them along. Murmurs grew. Evan's girlfriend Claire gripped his arm. "Evan," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Tell me this isn't true." He tried to smile at her. "Baby, it's just business." I slammed the next set of documents onto the podium. "Business? Then explain why your business included pawning off my yacht Margaret's Grace for a fraction of its value. Explain why my hotel, the one I built from brick and sweat, now has a new logo hanging over the door." The crowd gasped again. Claire's father, a stern man in a tailored tuxedo, leaned forward in his chair, his expression dark. "And if that isn't enough?" I continued, my voice rising. "Explain this." Angela Ruiz stepped out from the back of the room with a laptop. She projected images onto the ballroom's giant screen: receipts, credit card statements, photographs. Evan at a jeweler's counter buying a diamond ring for $58,000. Evan flashing a $70,000 Patek Philippe watch at a rooftop bar. Evan signing a lease for a penthouse suite at the Ritz-Carlton, this very hotel, for $14,000. Evan's Maserati contract signed in his own name, paid with funds tied to my accounts. Whispers turned to outright outrage. Guests leaned over to one another, eyes wide, voices low but urgent. Claire backed away from Evan as if he were radioactive. Her mother stood, her face pale. "Evan," she demanded, "is all of this true?" He stammered, hands raised. "It's temporary. Investments take time. It's all for our future." "Future," I cut in. "Your future was built on theft, on lies, on stealing from the very man who gave you life." I pulled the last document from the envelope, holding it high so all could see. And here's the part Evan never realized. Whitmore Realty, the agency he used to process every fraudulent deal, belongs to me. He literally paid me commission to rob me. My son thought he was clever. Instead, he left a paper trail so clear even a first-year law student could prove it. The room erupted. Some guests gasped, others laughed in disbelief. Phones were out, recording every second. Evan's face was crimson now, sweat dripping down his temples. Claire's father rose slowly, his voice like steel. "Young man, you lied to my family. You told us your wealth came from an inheritance. You courted my daughter under false pretenses. This engagement is over." Claire pulled the diamond ring off her finger, slammed it onto the table, and stepped away from him. "I can't even look at you," she whispered. The sound of applause broke out, hesitant at first, then stronger. Guests clapped, some shaking their heads, others cheering. Evan turned in circles, searching for an ally, but found none. Every eye in the room was on him, every camera recording his downfall. I raised my glass voice, calm and steady. "To my son Evan, who taught me one thing: blood may bind us, but honor is a choice, and honor can't be forged." The applause thundered now. Evan dropped the microphone, muttered something incoherent, and bolted toward the exit. Cameras followed him, guests whispering, laughing, shaking their heads. As the doors slammed behind him, the ballroom filled with voices again, people congratulating me, shaking my hand, thanking me for speaking truth. But I didn't feel triumph. Not yet. What I felt was the steady calm of a man who had finally turned the tables. The war wasn't over. The law would have its turn. But the mask Evan had worn for years was gone, torn off in front of the very people he lived to impress. And there was no hiding from the truth anymore. The morning after the Ritz-Carlton debacle, Charleston woke up buzzing. Word traveled faster than the tide. By dawn, the story had already hit the local paper. Banker's son exposed at gala-forged father's signature spent millions. By noon, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. Business partners, city officials, old friends, they all wanted confirmation. Some offered sympathy. Others congratulated me for handling the betrayal with what they called surgical precision. But I didn't feel victorious. Not yet. Because truth in public was one thing. Justice in court was another. 2 days later, Detective Sarah Harper from Charleston PD knocked on my door. She carried a thick folder, her expression grim. "Mr. Whitmore," she said, "we've received multiple complaints following the evidence you presented at the Ritz. But I want to hear it from you directly. Are you prepared to press charges against your son?" I didn't hesitate. "Yes. Elder fraud. Forgery. Theft. Whatever the law allows, I want it pursued." For 30 minutes, I gave a full statement. The forged documents, the sales of my yacht and hotel, the medical records proving I was competent, the receipts of his spending spree. Detective Harper recorded every word, her pen flying across the pages. When I handed over Angela's photographs and Michael's notarized copies of the contracts, she exhaled slowly. "This is one of the cleanest fraud cases I've ever seen. He won't wriggle out of this." Evan was arrested that same evening. They found him holed up in his penthouse suite, surrounded by empty champagne bottles and a half-packed suitcase. Cameras caught him being led out in handcuffs. His head was down, but the flashbulbs caught everything: the designer tuxedo, the 1,000-yard stare. The humiliation etched into every line of his face. The news spread like wildfire. Local channels ran the story non-stop. By the next morning, it was trending nationally: Charleston mogul's son arrested for defrauding father during heart surgery. The arraignment drew a crowd. I sat in the courtroom's front row, the same manila envelope resting in my lap. Evan shuffled in, wearing an orange jumpsuit shackled at the wrists. For the first time since the surgery, he looked like what he truly was: a boy who thought he could outwit his father and lost. The judge's words were sharp cold. "Mr. Evan Whitmore, you are charged with elder fraud, forgery, and theft in excess of $5 million. Do you understand the severity of these charges?" "Yes, Your Honor." He mumbled, voice barely audible. Michael leaned toward me. "With the weight of evidence we've compiled, he'll get years." But I wasn't thinking about years. I was thinking about Margaret, about the letter she left me. Don't let him inherit without earning it. I hadn't. And now the law was backing me. The trial was short. My lawyers presented the documents, the hospital records, the recordings. Angela testified about his spending habits. Dr. Collins confirmed my cognitive clarity. Every piece fell into place like steel beams locking into a bridge. Evan's defense attorney tried to paint him as a concerned son, overwhelmed by responsibility, making mistakes in judgment. But that argument collapsed under the weight of evidence. The jury took less than 2 hours. Guilty on all counts. The judge delivered the sentence: 5 years in state prison, restitution of $4.9 million, and probation for 5 years following release. Evan stood there, lips pressed thin, his eyes darting toward me. For a moment I thought he might beg, but he didn't. He just nodded, resigned. After the verdict, I stepped outside into a wall of cameras and microphones. Reporters shouted questions. "Mr. Whitmore, how does it feel to send your own son to prison? Do you see this as revenge or justice? Will you forgive him? I raised my hand and answered with the same calm I'd used in the ballroom. This isn't about revenge. This is about accountability. Elder abuse is a crime no matter who commits it. If my son can forge my signature and steal from me, then any vulnerable parent is at risk. Tonight, justice was served not just for me, but for everyone who's ever been told they're too old to fight back. The crowd erupted in applause. Cameras flashed. And for the first time since my heart surgery, I felt something deeper than anger or grief. I felt dignity. In the weeks that followed, my phone didn't stop. The Charleston Real Estate Association called me a pillar of integrity. The mayor asked me to speak at a city council meeting about elder fraud. National outlets ran my story as a cautionary tale, but the moment that stayed with me most came from an older woman at the grocery store. She touched my arm, tears in her eyes, and whispered, "You gave us a voice. Thank you." That was when I realized this wasn't just my battle. It was every parent's battle who had ever been used, tricked, or discarded by the very children they sacrificed for. And I had shown that we are not helpless. We can fight. We can win. 6 months after the sentencing, I received a letter. The envelope was plain, the handwriting familiar but subdued. It had been years since Evan wrote me anything longer than a text message. I opened it slowly, bracing myself. "Dad, I don't expect forgiveness. Prison strips a man bare. They've got me working in the library here. I started teaching other inmates how to read financial statements, how to avoid scams, how to budget. It's the first honest work I've done in years. For the first time, I understand what you meant when you said money means nothing without honor. I know I can't undo what I stole, not just the yacht and the hotel, but the trust you gave me. I see now that I was trying to take shortcuts to wear the crown without earning the weight. I'm sorry. I don't deserve another chance, but if God is merciful, maybe one day I'll be able to look you in the eye again and prove I've changed. Your son, Evan." I sat with that letter for a long time. The ink blurred as I read it again and again. A part of me wanted to crumple it to say, "Too little, too late." But another part, the father, not the mogul, saw a flicker of the boy I once carried on my shoulders at Charleston's 4th of July parade. I took out a pen and wrote my reply. "Son, God does give second chances, but He never gives them cheap. You'll have to earn every inch of the ground you lost. Not by speeches, not by promises, but by actions repeated day after day. I don't hate you. I never did. I hated what you became when you thought shortcuts were easier than sweat. When you come out, don't come looking for inheritance or empire. Come looking to rebuild the only thing that matters, your honor. Your father, Lawrence Whitmore." I sealed the envelope, placed it in the outgoing mail, and felt lighter than I had in years. That Sunday, I attended church for the first time since my surgery. When the choir sang, I found myself whispering a prayer, "Lord, thank you for carrying me through. Thank you for teaching me that justice and mercy are not opposites. They are two hands of the same truth." Faith had carried me through Margaret's passing, through my failing heart, and now through my son's betrayal. And in that sanctuary, I finally let go of the bitterness. Weeks later, I walked the marina where my yacht once sat. The slip was empty, but I no longer saw loss. I saw clarity. That yacht was gone, the hotel was gone, but my dignity, my principles, my faith remained. Those can't be forged, can't be pawned, can't be stolen. And maybe, just maybe, when Evan walks free again, He'll stand beside me here, not as a thief pretending to be a king, but as a man who understands what his mother and I tried to teach him, that honor is priceless. To those of you listening now, if this story has struck something in your heart, I ask you follow Brian's story. Because there are more stories like mine, stories of betrayal, of justice, of second chances. And maybe in them you'll find your own reflection. I'll leave you with this. My son thought wealth was measured in yachts, hotels, and watches. But in the end, the only wealth that lasts is the kind no one can steal: your honor, your integrity, your faith. Money can vanish in a moment. Honor is earned one choice at a time, and that more than any fortune is the legacy worth leaving behind.